Hello, I'm Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And today we've got some World War II and later Colts, which I promised I would do. And we have some great stuff. Um, I should probably start with these little tools so I don't forget them. And Stanley and Met Glass made these tools. The little rounded edge is to push out the mainspring housing pin, and the screwdriver part, like that they're a little L shape, is to take off the screws. And I've been in this business a long time, and I just learned about these things in the last year. A friend of mine brought them to me from uh, where is this guy? Yuma. Great guy. He actually brought a gun here, this Remington ran. Um, and he brought some to me and showed them to me, and I found them on eBay and bought some. These are the actual manufacturers from World War II. These are earlier ones. This is before World War I. This has two screwdrivers on it. Um, it's a The small one is for the grip screw, or the big one's for the grip screw, and the small one's for the side plate screws. And I thought that was just an amazing little tool. At one point, they wanted the push pin to take the mainspring housing out of a 1911, but they also wanted the small screwdriver, the large screwdriver, and this is called the Tomahawk. But these ones aren't too pricey. The World War II ones, the World War I stuff and earlier gets pretty pricey. So I'm going to start with the earliest gun. That would be a Colt. This is a 1941, inspected by W.B. Waldberg Brolong. He was I'm not sure if he was a colonel or not. Most of the inspectors were, like Frank J. Atwood, you see FJA, he was a colonel, and so when the GHD, that was Brigadier General Guy Drury. And this is a Guy Drury right here. But at any rate, the 1941s were somewhat rare because Japanese hadn't bombed Pearl Harbor yet. That was December 7th, 41, end of the year. And so there was no real need in 41 for the 45s for the military. And the government only bought, I think, 35,000. So that makes this a pretty rare gun, being a first year. And it looks like it has all the original hardware. Being in 1911 A1, has the short trigger, the arched mainspring housing, the reduced size hammer, and the safety switches and what have you that are typical of the World War or pre-World War II and World War II guns. The second one, I think this is a 1943. I wrote it down, 43 or 44. I made notes this time so I wouldn't forget. 1944. This came to us in a Grayton and Knight holster from a very close friend of the family. And he was issued this gun on the Tennessee. And so they're really pre-World War II battleships, but we used everything in World War II. And they had booms instead of the bridges. They had the two booms at each end. And he told a lot of stories, and he talked about shipping ammunition back to his home in Chicago and the other things that he did. In amongst them was he brought this beautiful Colt pistol in just remarkable shape. He was an ensign. He told us some stories about the Tennessee, and you hear a lot of stories, and you're always grateful to hear them, and you're never really sure about anything. This guy was a good man, and he used to tell us about his battleship being hit by a Zero, a Kamikaze, and the guy came down at his ship at one of the booms, the rear boom, and he missed it. The ship was moving, front boom, he missed it, and he pulled full flaps, and he did a loop and came down and hit the fantail of the ship, taking out 20 men, including their chaplain and their seaplane. And when he told the story, he got pretty excited with telling it, and everything was pretty neat. So years later, my son found a video on YouTube. This is many years later, of a Japanese warplane. I don't know what they use, zeros or whatever for kamikazes, but there's footage from another ship of the attack on the ship. And he was a fire control officer, I believe. Had something to do with the guns. He had some hearing problems, but at any rate, um, it was nice to see the footage years later after hearing that story from him. What a great guy! He brought this gun back and he gave it to a member of the family, not me. Um, but it's in the family. It's a great gun, and so I think this is a 1943 Remington ran 1943. This got a great, interesting story. By the way, Remington ran was not the Remington of today. It was the Remington Typewriter Company and the Rand Company getting together in 1927. They're not the ones that made the Remington UMCs for World War I. This was the Remington Typewriter Company, who also made, I believe, BARs for World War II, and the Rand Company. But at any rate, they made a beautiful 45, and this one has a great history. We, U.S. government, America, stopped using these as our standard carry pistol in 1985. That was the end of it. This one is when it went to a refurbishing company, or an arsenal, to be refurbished or reworked in 1982, and it's stamped AMAD 1182, and that's Anniston Armory Depot, and that's November 82. And so this was really at the very end of it all, because we had Augusta Arsenal, Rock Island, there was two others that did refurbs on these guns, and a lot of them are stamped AA and RIA and others. This is the end of it. This was in 82. This one was done at Anniston, and they did a beautiful job. It's got a beautiful finish on it, and I'm just proud to have them here to look at. I've never seen these markings. We'll get you some close-ups of it. And so that's the trio that we have of the World War II stuff, first starting with 41 and going to 45. And of course, the Great and Night, 1943, this came from Harry, a friend of the family. He brought that back from the Tennessee. And this was on the 41 gun, and it's a Walsh Harness Company. Of course, they were probably making harnesses for horses or whatever. And they ended up making holsters during World War II. Another great piece of history. And so we've got some ammunition here we'll get some pictures of. This is a Frankfurt Arsenal 1943 box of ammo, ball ammo, and it's got all the specifics on there. This is a prize of mine. I'm not really sure where I bought it, but I think I got it from one of those California dealers. There was Harrison Carroll, William Drollinger, but this guy was David Bruin, and he specialized in Colt military and Colt firearms. And this is a Union switch and signal slide. To have a complete gun today is a real prize. They only made 55, some books say 55,000. They were all between like 985,000 and 1,100,000. They were all right over the break of the million mark. And they supplied, I've heard 55,000. I know I'm going to get letters on it. This is a complete slide. I think it must have been really sad how this slide got to be alone, because it still has all its hardware, so it was fixed up to be used. And what happens is a lot of people would see on the military guns property of the United States government, and they would think it was stolen. And they would grind off the numbers, or they would take the gun apart and throw away the slide and get, God forbid, an Essex frame from Brownells. They were like less than $100, and you put your own gun back together. This was 40 years ago. But somehow I latched onto this, and I also latched onto a Savage slide, and I think they made very, very low numbers, like 100, and it had a ball, a flaming ball with an S in the middle. But this one I hung on to, and I always thought I was going to make a gun for it, but I'm always too busy trying to do the guns at the shop, so we'll get you a good shot at that. There's Swissville, PA, and that's a Union Switch and Signal slide, and no, it's not for sale. So if we leave World War II and we get up into the 50s, and it's a high polished nickel, one of my favorites. I have a weakness for nickel. A 1959 with the correct magazine, and I never really did a lot with the gun. I did feed work so it would work, and I think I set the trigger pull at 3.5 or 4 pounds. But I'm just turned on by the quality and the fit and the polish, and the satin across the top and bottom. It's a beautiful 59 nickel plated gun, and I hold it dear to my heart. Those aren't the grips that came with it, but I have a weakness for the World War I grips, and I always put them on everything I find. I just love them. And then we get into a little bit more of the craziness. Who made this? This is a AWC can, and I keep calling it a Nexus 3, but I'm not sure if that's what it's called. It's got a system in it where the barrel and the extension in there move independently. There's a spring in there, so it doesn't have to move the whole can. It just moves the attachment in there and the spring. Nielsen device, that's right. And I made this up because everybody was making up guns like this, but this was even before the red dot thing went crazy and the plastic gun thing went crazy. This at one time was a hot rod because it had night sights, a flashlight, a laser grip, and a silencer. And this finish was put on by Robert Veal. He did a beautiful job of doing camo, and he did guns in purple for the ladies, and he did them in gold and black and accented them, and he would do whatever you wanted. He would just charge you for every new color because he'd have to go buy the paint. But he would do a beautiful job. I haven't shot this gun much, but it's pretty quiet and it's enjoyable. It's got my hand cut checkering on it, which I don't offer at the shop anymore. That's a lot of work. I used to be able to do them in 2 hours, and now my hands would just lock up trying to do them. But I did them without glasses in my 30s and 40s, and had a great time doing checkering. Of course, this is a front cocking serrations like that were requested by Captain Buck for the 1902. If you watch the pre-1911 video, it talks about the captain wanting the cocking serrations up front. And so, at any rate, it's got a King's beaver tail and a checkered mainspring housing and a Barstow barrel. It's got kind of all the tricks from before the guns went plastic with red dots. And I think they're wonderful. And there's a lot of people out there that know how to use them really well, and they're young and fast and agile. And it's amazing and fun watching them use them. It's just not my style. So there's something I was going to mention, but my son told me maybe you shouldn't but I think everything has to come out. My shop was open in 1980 when the military was still using the 1911's. And in 85, the Department of the Navy sent out a letter to all the Phoenix area gunsmiths offering a contract to cut up their 50 1911's, cut the frames in half where you could still see the serial number. And they wanted a quote to cut 50 frames in half and then return the frames. And they would come and you would sign paperwork and blah, blah, blah. And so back then there weren't websites. It was 15 years before people had computers. And they sent me a letter offering this contract. And there was a phone number. We had phone numbers everywhere back then, not live chat. And so I called the people down there and I asked for the armor and asked what they wanted. And I said, so on this contract, what do you need back? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're going to bring me 50 complete firearms. What do you need back? The whole firearm, or do you just want the frame back cut in half? And he busted out laughing and he said, you're the first. He said, and that's a great question. He said, really, all I need to satisfy the contract is the frames cut in half and made unusable, but with the serial numbers all visible. And he says, the rest you can do with what you want. And I said, fine, I'll mail in my bid. You had to mail it back into him. I filled out the paperwork and I put 1 cent per gun, or 50 cents for the job, cutting all 50 up. And I mailed it back and I got the contract for cutting them in half. And he came up with a box of them and we signed them all in and I logged them all in. And I took them all apart and lined all the frames up, got my cutting torch out, zoom, 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 broke my heart in half. And then I put all the frames in a box and I looked over at all my stuff and I had 50 slides, World War II slides. I had 50 barrels, hammers, triggers, grip safeties, springs, grips. And I thought, what a bonsai. And so I called him up, told him they're ready. He came up with a box. We went through each one. He checked them off on his deal there. We each signed it. He handed me my part of the contract, tore it off, and he left. And in 90 days, I got a letter from the U.S. Treasury, and I thought, what the hell is this? Am I in trouble for something? And I opened it up, and there was a check in there for 50 cents from the U.S. Treasury to pay for that job. And I thought it was great. I should have kept the check, but I went ahead and threw it in the account, with other checks that came in that day. But that's my story on the 1911. It's hard to tell. I love the girls, and I hated doing it, but I was in my 20s, and I needed the money, needed the parts. I started, every time I came across a frame, boom, I made a gun up. And so it was a lot of fun. So if you have any questions or comments on the 1911, I've taken it up to around 1985, and that's about where I got off the ship. And I love the new guns. I love the new Colts they make, the straight stacks. I'm just not into the plastic high caps and the red dots, but it's okay. They're all wonderful. We should all enjoy what we want. Send some questions and comments. It's getting a little lively out there in some of those comments, but I enjoy them. Have a nice night.